This meeting is being recorded.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. We're just going to give it a minute or so to let everyone join, and then we will kick things off. And we really appreciate you joining us for the lunch hour. So thank you so much. All right, we have a lot to cover today. So I think I'm just going to get right into it. Welcome to our Get That Money webinar. The goal of this webinar is really to let everyone know about child tax credit and other credits that Ohio families can access this year. We want to ensure that Ohio families just know about these credits and can access these credits. I am joined today by a very special guest, Jason Carter, who is a child tax credit advocate and parent who received the child tax credit last year, and we'll talk about what it meant to him and his family. Also, Will Petrik, who is a budget researcher with Policy Matters Ohio, and Courtney O'Reilly, who is a senior program manager in tax benefits with Code for America, who's going to walk us through Code for America's really helpful tools on how to access child tax credit and the other credits you'll hear about today. We have four main objectives of this webinar. We're first just going to talk about the impact of the tax credits on children and adults and families in Ohio. We're going to provide an overview of some of the changes to the child tax credit and eligibility, the temporary changes for the 2021 tax filing. And we're going to provide an overview of the earned income tax credit and the child and dependent care credit. And then finally, we're going to learn about how to access or help others access the credits that families are entitled to. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Jason Carter to talk a little bit about his experience receiving the child tax credit and what it meant to him. So Jason?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jason Carter. I am the parent and advocate for the child tax credit. My wife and I received the child tax credit for the first time in such a timely time in our lives. I had just lost my job, and it was a really good paying job for me, and it was in a career that I love. And so when we received the child tax credit, we were receiving $300 towards childcare, and that was the biggest blessing that we could have at that time. One thing that I talk about a lot is everyone having access to their American dream. And in a way, the child tax credit helped us move towards that dream. Because even with the child tax credit, we were able to save that amount of money back into our savings. And one of our big goals in life was to own a home, which we were planning to do in this year of 2022. And so that afforded us the potential to make a pretty sizable like down payment or to go towards closing costs, that kind of thing. And we want that because we are moving towards providing stability not only for us in our lives, but also for our daughter, who is 19 months and full of energy. We want to be able to give her a home to grow up in, a yard to play in, plenty of space to run around and have fun and enjoy her life. Um, and so when we received that child tax credit, we were able to stress less about that money, and where that was going to be coming from to go towards childcare. And so once the child tax credit ended, um, we really started to feel the impact because although I did find another job, it takes 2.5 paychecks for me to make up for one paycheck that I was receiving at my previous job. So that puts us in a really, 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 really tough bind. And, going back to our American dream and building this life up and hoping to buy a home this year, now our plan has changed drastically. We realize that that is not going to be a possibility for us this year. And not to say that it's not possible at all. Um, but it definitely makes it a lot harder. And that is one thing that I've learned, that um, many folks in the position to approve this child tax credit or work it back into legislation um, may or may not understand, is that any money that go towards helping families with childcare, that affords them the ability to have better insight into what the future may hold. That gives families like mine hope that we can, achieve all the things that we dream to achieve, and to provide this life that we've always wanted to live, and to, one day set our daughter up for a nice life for herself. Um, yeah, and it's just the thing that some folks don't think about is the long term effects that something like this has. In order for us to be, the best parents that we can be, um, we try to minimize the stress that we have in our lives. So my wife is super busy with work, and it's a job that she also has to bring home with her a lot. Um, and so we want to minimize stress in that sense. Myself, with the job that I have and looking for employment to get back into my career and stuff, that provides stress. And now not having the child tax credit is adding more stress into it. So what folks don't realize is providing that child tax credit, that is a big burden that is lifted off of our shoulders. And that gives us capacity to be more present parents for our daughter, and to be more present people for each other, partners for each other. And that's just a couple of examples of why this child tax credit is so important. And the effect it has had, since not receiving it is, it's just makes our American dream seem tougher to achieve. Um, Thankfully, my wife and I have always been big on communication, so we work really hard, and we are really intentional about how we communicate with one another and being supportive of one another, even though we are going through, this is some of the probably the most stressful time in our relationship. We've been together since 2014, been married for 3 years, and it's tough. But thankfully, we are able to communicate and support one another in that way, and we still have, one of the things that keeps us together is this big dream of, owning a home and setting up our future so that we have a better life and our daughter has the best quality of life. And so that's why the child tax credit is so important, um, because it just helps families achieve, what they want to achieve. And, we want to set ourselves up um, to enjoy our quality of life, improve our quality of life and enjoy it. And we also want to set our daughter up for a bright future. And that's why this is so very important.
Thank you, Jason, for sharing that. I guess the bad news is that it's not included in Build Back Better yet. We're hoping that there is some federal legislation. The good news is that families can still get their second half of the child tax credit, or for some families, their full amount by filing their taxes this year. But thanks so much for sharing that. I think it really resonates with, especially the point about it's not just a financial relief, it's also a stress relief and allows you to be more present with your family, and then what that means when we think about thriving and flourishing families in Ohio. So just thanks so much for sharing that. I am now going to pass it over to Will Petrik to talk about the impact of child tax credits on families here in Ohio.
Thank you, Katherine. And yeah, I also just want to say big thank you to Jason for just sharing your experience, sharing your story, and being an advocate for kids and families. Yeah, it really appreciate you. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. Thanks for being here. Again, my name is Will Petrik. I'm the budget researcher with Policy Matters Ohio. My work focuses specifically on budget and policy solutions to help kids, adults, and families live with stability, economic security, and basic human dignity. So, I do research on the impact of tax credits. So, first wanted to just, Jason laid out what it means to him and his family. I also wanted to kind of talk more broadly about some of the research. So, first, next slide, please. Just why does cash matter and why do tax credits matter? It particularly matters for kids that live in deep poverty, partly because kids that live in deep poverty are less healthy, they're less secure, they're more stressed. But when families have resources they need to pay for all the basics, to pay for food, housing, childcare, healthcare, we know kids benefit in so many different ways. They're healthier, they get better grades in school, they earn more during their lifetime. They're also less likely to engage in criminal activity or to get involved in the child welfare system. So I think broadly, when we as a society prioritize the health and well-being of kids and families, we all benefit. Next slide. So, what specifically has the child tax credit meant? So, I think as everyone knows on this call, the pandemic completely upended life for so many people. Jason, you talked about your dreams for your family and your child and your future home. So many people have had to put their dreams on hold. And we also know that, costs for families are increasing. So the cost of food, gas, healthcare, housing, all of these costs continue to rise. And that cash had an immediate impact for security and stability for families. So 1.2 million families received that monthly child tax credit payment last year between the months of July and December. And again, it had an immediate impact. There was a decrease in hunger and food insecurity. It helped more families get enough to eat. Jason talked about stress. It was a major stress relief and helped, again, people pay for basics like groceries, rent, clothing, the heating bill, phone. We also saw fewer households with children reporting difficulty paying for those basic monthly household expenses. Another major thing, it immediately reduced childhood poverty by close to 30%. Next slide, please. Jason talked about, again, that was temporary. It ended in December. So unfortunately, at the beginning of this year, again, when heating bills were high, we saw a reversal. So unfortunately, there was an immediate increase in childhood poverty when those monthly payments went away. So one study showed that 3.7 million more kids are living in poverty this year. The other thing I wanted to point out, so the federal earned income tax credit is another tax credit, but in 2016, that lifted 265,000 Ohioans out of poverty. So there's also a lot of research on the earned income tax credit and how that, helps have higher birth weights for newborns. And it also, again, has a major impact on future outcomes for kids, education and economic outcomes. So all that to say, tax credits really matter. We're here to talk about getting that money. Again, Katherine and Jason highlight, like, this is more than money. This is more than a check. This is security and stability and about the future for our kids and about dreams. But yeah, just really wanted to highlight, like, this really matters for the health and well-being of kids and families across the state. And I think with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Katherine to just share more about the child tax credit.
Thanks, Will. Next slide, please. So yeah, I'm Katherine Ungar. I'm with the Children's Defense Fund. I'm a policy associate, mainly focused on issues around child nutrition and anti-poverty, which is why I'm really excited to talk about the child tax credit today. from this section, I really want to talk about like, what is it? I really didn't understand the way the federal legislation changed the child tax credit until I dug into it. And so I am trying to simplify it down in 2 slides so that all of you can understand what this temporary change looks like and why it's so important that people file their taxes this year because of these changes and how much money they stand to gain by filing their taxes. So as I mentioned, this is a temporary change through federal legislation last year that expanded and increased the child tax credit for the 2021 filing tax year. What it did is it increased the child tax credit to $3,000 for a child under 17 and $3,600 if the child was under 6. And that's a really significant amount, as you can imagine what that means in paying for childcare, paying for food. And that's the other thing I think that's important about the child tax credit is it wasn't directed to go towards, it didn't have to go towards food or it didn't have to go to childcare, but it was really up to the family to figure out and determine how that family needs to meet can use this to meet their basic family needs. Now, it is important, I think, to note here, and I know a lot of you on this webinar work with families directly, and so many of our families may have received half of their child tax credit last year because what the federal legislation did was it allowed the child tax credit to come in advance monthly payments in amounts of $300 or $250 respectively from July 15th through December 15th, 2021. But those monthly payments only went to those individuals who either received it automatically because they had filed their 2020 or 2019 taxes, or who had signed up for the stimulus payment or through getctc.org. And so what that means is we have a lot of families who likely never received even the first half of their child tax credit because they don't file taxes, aren't required to file taxes, or what have you, which means that they stand to gain a lot of money, that $3,600 or $3,000 per child by filing taxes. But it is true also that all of those families who received the first half of the child tax credit last year also can file their taxes this year to get the second half. So actually they have to file their taxes to get the second half, which is an equivalent of $1,800 or $1,500, which is a lot of money. So we can go to the next slide, please. So who's eligible for the child tax credit? I want to pause here because 92% of families of Ohio families are estimated to be eligible. So likely families are eligible. Families you're working with are eligible. And they're eligible because the federal legislation temporarily expanded who was eligible for it, so that now families don't have to have an income to get the credit. So that means that if you make $0, you are still entitled to the child tax credit by filing. And I think the obstacle here is that families who make under certain amounts or no money don't usually file taxes because they aren't required to. And so then again, I just want to emphasize they stand to miss out on these payments. That maximum credit of that $3,600 and $3,000 doesn't even begin to phase out until an individual is making $75,000 individually or $150,000, filing jointly. Here are the parameters around claiming the child tax credit. So to claim the credit on behalf of the child must have a social security number, be under the age of 18 as of December 31st, 2021, have lived with you for more than half the year, and have some kind of relationship with you, like a child, adopted child, stepchild, grandchild, niece, nephew, or certain other relatives, depending on if they really are your dependent and live with you for that half of the year. I want to pause here because this is really important. You do not, as a parent or guardian claiming the child tax credit on behalf of the child, you do not yourself have to have a social security number. The child that you're claiming on behalf of does have to have a social security number. So if there's a parent or caregiver who might have an individual taxpayer ID number, but not a social security number, and their child has a social security number, they are eligible to claim that benefit on behalf of that child. Thank you. So I want to pause here because I know a lot of people on this webinar work with new families and families who have welcomed babies in 2021. And so we want to just pause to emphasize that those families never received a dime of their child tax credit for those babies born in 2021 because the IRS never really allowed you to update your dependents to claim that child tax credit. So they didn't receive any of the advance payments, which means they're eligible for that full $3,600 for that baby born in 2021. So just spread the word on that, especially in this community where I know we're working with new moms and new babies. Next slide, please. So I think it's always helpful for me to think about this in the form of an example. So in this situation, we're looking at a family who welcomes a new baby in December 2021 and has a 4-year-old child. The family is entitled to the child tax credit for the newborn because they never received any of it in advance last year. So for a total of $3,600. And they did receive the advance monthly payments for the 4-year-old, but they are entitled to that second half of $1,800 when they file taxes. So in total, in just child tax credit payments for this family, just by filing taxes, we're looking at $5,400. Next slide. Quickly, I want to talk about the third stimulus check, or known as the recovery rebate. So this was Congress passed legislation to issue payments to people to reduce the financial burden of COVID-19. Many of you may have received those stimulus payments in the amount of $1,400 for each eligible adult and qualifying dependent. But if you work with families or you yourself didn't get your third stimulus payment in 2021, or you only got a partial amount, or you had a new baby in 2021 and you didn't receive the stimulus payment for that child, then when you file your taxes, you can claim it as a recovery rebate and get that full amount. Eligibility, similar, there's no income requirement. It does phase out at very high incomes, and the person claiming must have a social security number to receive that stimulus check. So again, even in a family where the child might have a social security number and the parent or guardian does not, that child is still eligible for that third stimulus payment. The dependent you're claiming also cannot be claimed as a dependent for somebody else, and they must be a U.S. citizen, permanent resident, or qualifying resident alien. Next slide, please. So just looking at our prior example, we already determined that in that family situation, we were looking at a child tax credit payment for this family of $5,400. But then when we add the recovery rebate to that, which we're going to look at, the 4-year-old had received their third stimulus payment. So when they file taxes, they won't get that additional amount, but that newborn baby never received that stimulus payment. So that's an additional $1,400 added on in this example. So for a total in just the child tax credit and recovery rebate tax credits, we're looking at $6,800 that this family stands to gain by filing taxes. So with that, I know that's a lot, so please, if you have questions, put them in the chat for us, but I'm going to hand it over to Will to talk about some other really exciting tax credits that have been temporarily changed for our families this year. Thanks, Will.
Thank you, Katherine. So I'm gonna, like Katherine said, talk a little bit more about both the federal earned income tax credit as well as the child and dependent care tax credit. These are both opportunities for adults and families to get that money. So the earned income tax credit and the child and dependent care tax credit were also, like the child tax credit, temporarily expanded for tax year 2021. So if you worked and you were paid low wages in 2021, you may be eligible to get money back at tax time or decrease the amount of federal taxes that you owe. So I'll be referring to the earned income tax credit as the EITC. Folks should just know that more people this year than ever before will be eligible. And the credit amount has also expanded. So workers who don't have kids at home will receive a larger credit, and workers who were previously left out, those aged 19 to 24 and workers 65 and over will now be included if they're eligible based on their income and their circumstances. I also wanted to note, so Ohio also has a state earned income tax credit. I'm going to be focusing my remarks today just on the federal EITC. So this first slide just shows, basically what the credit could be worth, the maximum amount. So the max amount for a worker raising 3 or more kids is $6,728. And the maximum amount for an adult without any dependent kids is just a little over $1,500. So next slide, please. So the eligibility for this is different than the child tax credit. You or your spouse must have worked or brought in income last year in 2021. And so this slide just shows the maximum gross annual income to be eligible. So again, if you're a single adult with no dependent children, you must make $21,430 or less to get the EITC. On the other hand, again, if you're married and filing jointly and you claim 3 children, your gross annual income must be at or below $57,414. In addition to the income requirements, you, your spouse, and your children must all have a valid Social Security number, and the child must be under age 19 or under age 24 if they're a full-time student. And the child can be any age if they are permanently disabled, and the child or children must live with you in the US for over half of the year. And then the other requirement is, the child must be either your son, daughter, grandchild, stepchild, adopted child, or younger sibling, step sibling, half sibling, or a foster child placed with you by a government agency. So that's a little bit more about the eligibility. The next slide basically gives you an idea of the size of the credit depending on the household situation. So basically, if you're a married couple filing jointly, making $20,000, or that you made $20,000 last year, and you have 3 kids, you would get a little over $6,700 from the earned income tax credit. And the couple that's filing jointly making $30,000 last year with 2 kids would get a credit worth a little over $5,000. Next slide. So like Katherine, it's nice to have just like an example of one family. So Mary and John have 2 kids. Together they make $40,000. They would be eligible for $2,915 from the federal earned income tax credit. Next slide. Once I'm done talking, I can also share in the chat basically a link so you can look up whether you and your family are eligible and how much you might get from the earned income tax credit. So again, the child independent tax credit is a lesser known tax credit, but again, it's another opportunity to get that money. So if you have kids under age 13 and paid for childcare either to work or to look for work in 2021, you could be eligible for up to $8,000 as a tax credit. And this credit helps offset childcare expenses or care of an adult dependent who's unable to care for themselves. So in terms of like what has changed, again, this is a 1-year temporary expansion, but the amount was expanded. So the credit was previously up to $3,000 for 1 child, up to $6,000 for 2. That's been raised to $4,000 and $8,000 respectively. And it's also more inclusive. So the credit before was non-refundable. And so that excluded millions of Black and brown families and millions of families with low wages. So it is now refundable and will include all families with low wages. Previously, the credit only reduced taxes that people owed. So again, those expansions are temporary. They're only for tax year 2021. But again, if you're serving families and you're serving kids, this is potentially a significant benefit, and people can get money back for out-of-pocket expenses for childcare in 2021. That could be copays. It could be child care center based care, family child care homes, before or after school care, or summer and day camps. So next slide just again shows how that same family could benefit. So again, Mary and John have 2 kids and they make $40,000. And they last year spent $4,000 for summer camp for their 7-year-old. And they spent $5,000 for childcare for their 4-year-old. So a total of $9,000. They'll get half of that back, or they'd be eligible for up to $4,500 from the federal child and dependent care tax credit. So again, I have a link where I can share with you a way to estimate how much money your family could be eligible for if you were spending money on childcare or daycare or dependent care for an older adult last year. And I think with that, I'm going to pass it back to Katherine.
Thanks, Will. So I guess, we just learned about all these credits that families are likely eligible for, especially for this year, and how much money they stand to gain by filing taxes. So we are really fortunate and lucky to have someone from Code for America, Courtney O'Reilly, join us to talk about some of the amazing tools that Code for America has developed to make filing taxes more accessible to more people. So right here is our, and we're going to send the slides out to everyone after, but this is a QR code if that's helpful for you to sort of get to the resource we're going to be discussing. And also we included the link, but for now, I'm going to hand it over to Courtney to talk about these tools. Thanks, Courtney.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, perfect. Hi, everybody. Yeah, my name is Courtney O'Reilly. I'm with Code for America. And those of you who aren't familiar with us, we're a nonprofit organization that partners with government to strengthen the delivery of public services through human-centered technology. And one of those government services we've really attacked in the last couple of years is tax credits and tax benefits that were just discussed previously. So if we go on to the next slide. To get started, I just want to make you all aware about some tools that we've created that can help families access these tax credits for free. And next slide. Perfect. And I don't want to let anybody get overwhelmed by this screen because we're going to break it down, but basically just want to highlight that at getyourrefund.org, we have essentially 4 different services available to folks. Something I just known in my previous experience of working directly with clients is that there's no silver bullet that works for everybody. There's usually pros and cons to each of these approaches, and it's up to families to really try to understand what is the best service for them. And so we just want to give you some advice on what we think are those pros and cons and the limitations of each of these services. The next slide. Perfect. So the first one, and this is our flagship program, it's Get Your Refund. It's our virtual VITA service. The intention is to help connect families who need to access and file their tax return to volunteer income tax assistance services, or VITA. So getting help from a volunteer preparing and filing their tax return. The way this works is they would go to getyourrefund.org, choose the virtual VITA option, and then they'd be taken through a set of questions that essentially fill out this intake sheet for the VITA program on the back end. And then they would upload pictures of their required documents. This is kind of the one hurdle I want to really highlight, because it can be a challenge for families, is that in order to be served by a VITA program, an individual needs to show their photo ID and a picture of their social security card or ITIN letter. So we can't take it from a W-2, we can't take it from the top of their head, we have to see that card or that letter in order to serve them. So just want to call that out, that sometimes can be challenging for families to engage VITA in this way. But if they do have this service will help them claim all of their eligible benefits. So from that child tax credit, any missing stimulus payments, their earned income tax credit. Ohio has some great state credits that they can claim while filing through this. The whole process takes about 2 to 3 weeks. So it's one of those that, because it's all done virtually, we have to do 2 different phone calls with the client. So these are just, again, this is where you can get the bulk of the assistance. This is where you can get all of the tax credits. It's a bigger commitment on the client's part in terms of time and resources. And then next screen. The next one is, and this isn't necessarily a service of ours, it's just helping folks locate an in-person service. So if they live in that digital divide and they just aren't going to be able to utilize VITA virtually, there are in-person locations. And so at our tax site or at Get Your Refund, they can get access to a lookup tool. They can enter their address, their zip code, find the nearest locations for them. One thing I want to mention is that if you're helping somebody find a good in-person location, you're going to definitely want to click on the name of the tax site so you can get additional information, including if they require an appointment, what are their actual operating hours, all of those types of things. And next slide. And then there's our File Myself service. And so this in other worlds is called facilitated self-assistance or do it yourself. But it's basically sending a client to free tax filing software. In this case, it's going to be called TaxSlayer, where they can file a federal and state return for free as long as they make less than $73,000 in income. All forms are included. It files federal and state. So this again is a way for them to access all of their tax credits and get the largest refund possible. But they are going to be preparing their own tax return. This can feel really intimidating for people who have been told their entire lives that taxes are really complicated. For most people who have a W-2, have some unemployment compensation, maybe some Social Security income, it's not that challenging as long as you have access to the technology like a computer to be able to complete it. This service is not limited by volunteer capacity. So VITA is always going to be limited with how many volunteers do they have to help serve those clients. This, since the client themselves are preparing the return, we can send any number of people to this resource. We also have chat support and email support. So if somebody runs into a question or a problem, either with the software or a tax issue, our client success team is able to help them answer them and guide them through that process. So there is some assistance. It's just not as robust as what volunteer income tax assistance programs provides. And next slide, perfect. And then we have coming in May of this year, our Get CTC Express option. And last year we launched Get CTC for the first time to help folks file for their advanced child tax credit payments and their missing first and second stimulus payment. And we saw a huge amount of success. We helped 115,000 people file using this really simplified filing tool. It's mobile friendly, so it's something that people can complete on their cell phone. They don't have to upload any documents as long as they're under the filing threshold, so they don't have a filing requirement. They can use this tool to get their remaining child tax credit and missing third stimulus payment. And we know there's a number of families who just need to claim that because they don't have any reportable income, all of those things. One thing I do want to say about Get CTC is also there may be a benefit for a client to file a full tax return. And because of the earned income credit, because of the child and dependent care credit, all the things that were just mentioned. But the resources it takes to do that, even for free, can be overwhelming and feel like another burden for most families. So why I want to bring this up is that if you're talking to families, if you're doing this outreach, you might encounter some people who those other services just may not work for them because they don't have a copy of their Social Security card. They don't have access to the internet. They don't have an in-person VITA site located near them, whatever it may be. I think it's important to remind them that another resource is coming in May of this year that is a much faster, easier process. Last year when we had Get CTC, most people were able to complete the actual form in less than 15 minutes and get an accepted return, and then they're done, and that's it. So just want to call that out just as kind of a reminder that another tool is coming. We're delayed in just when it was going to be available, but hopefully by May of 2022, this will be a resource you can send people directly to. Next slide. And now I'm going to take over a little bit and show you just what it looks like when you actually go to get your refund. So let me go ahead and do this. So using and I've got my automatic one in here, but let's say you're going to getyourrefund.org and then CTC Ohio or the CTC OH as the unique URL. One thing I want to point out is it doesn't stay up there, but it does mean that it's tracking. So if you send somebody there, we can track to see, did that client actually finish a return? Did they start a return? Which process did they use, with a dashboard that's shareable to our partners. Once they're here, they have the option of clicking Get Started. When they click Get Started, that'll take them through a number of different questions, usually about 6 questions, to triage them to figure out what service might work best for them out of the ones that I mentioned. But they can also skip down here to the active choice page where they can choose, okay, I want to be served by virtual VITA, I want to do it myself, or I want to sign up for a notification once Express is available. This page also gives them some of the information I was just sharing with you of sort of the limitations and challenges that some people are going to need to upload a social security card. For Express, all you have to do is know the numbers, but here are the associated credits. So the questions are all mobile friendly, but just want to kind of show you what it looks like. So it'll give an explanation of all of those. And then just asking some preferred information just to make sure that we are able to follow up with them and contact them. But otherwise, they don't need to go through that questionnaire if they know exactly what they want. But if they do want some assistance figuring out the right one, that's when you want to click Get Started. I feel like I'm rushing through that, so apologies if I'm going too quickly. But if we want to go back to the slides, I can, okay, perfect. So something I just want to mention with outreach to new, and we call them intermittent filers, but people who don't frequently file a tax return, is that our hope is that they file a full tax return and get all of the credits that they qualify for. But we know outreach alone is not enough for people who have to file a full tax return. They usually need additional assistance, whether that be through VITA or a community partner like yours. With Express filing, our studies basically showed for most people, outreach may be enough. Just sending them a quick text message saying, hey, go to getctc.org to fill out a simplified form. We hopefully made a simple enough tool that it's easy enough for most people to do on their own, but just want to kind of call out that, again, it may be worth letting disgruntled filers know that a simpler tool is coming if they can't get through that full process. And then real quickly, because I know we are a bit over time, I just want to call out how you can help clients in your area. So we have, part of my role at Code for America is leading our Navigator program. And navigators are there to help in a number of different ways, even if they have no idea about taxes, even if they are not tax certified in any respect, there's still a number of things you can do to help people access these resources. The first is just awareness and trust building. A lot of people don't, as was already emphasized on this training, a lot of people don't know that they qualify for the second half of their child tax credit. Even more people don't know that they may qualify for even more benefits this year because of the expansion of the earned income tax credit and state credits. And it can be really confusing. Where do we go? Once you know that you should file, how do you know what's a trustworthy service? There are ads they're going to hear throughout the day of where they should go. And this is really where we want to help make sure that they're using a trustworthy service, whether that's Get Your Refund, a local VITA site, other resources. We just want to make sure to steer them in the right direction. The next can be helping them acquire tax documents and information. So if they don't have their Social Security card, there's a way for them to apply for a replacement. We have documents and resources to help you know where to go to get some of that information. So you can help them get a step closer to filing a full tax return by just giving them a point in the right direction of here's where you can go if you are missing those items. And then you can also set up a Get Your Refund virtual VITA support site. So if you are helping people get access by virtual VITA through Get Your Refund, doing things like helping take clear pictures of their tax documents is probably one of the most helpful ways of determining if somebody is going to be able to finish the process. It's amazing. It's just one of those that it's really hard to kind of communicate that with clients of, we only see half the document that you've shown. Can you upload another picture? The other way is to set up what we call a file myself support site. So if people are filing their own tax return, often they just need access to a computer and a printer. So if you work with community organizations that have a computer lab, we have guides to help clients through, so they're doing their own taxes, and then they know where to go to seek additional assistance if they run into a problem. A lot of it is just providing that reassurance and then space so that they can access that information. And with all of these things, if you wanted to get started, a couple of key things just to note. None of this requires any kind of tax certification. We are not expecting you to answer any tax questions. It's mostly just about awareness and access to resources. You want to make sure to identify partners who are equipped to meet the needs and are trusted in their communities. Finding those trusted messengers is half the battle. Who's going to have that voice and who's going to engage frequently with clients is key. You can sign up for Get Your Refund Navigator updates. I will post the link, if it's not already done so, to our Airtable form, so you can be made aware of when new resources and become available, if we have other trainings, all of those things on our Navigator newsletter. Definitely, whenever you can, use the unique URL that's assigned for Ohio and for this group, so we can help track all of the efforts that are being made. Make sure you understand that you can provide access and assist, or reassurance and trust building. You cannot provide tax advice unless you are a certified preparer. So just making sure you don't feel that burden and you don't step in to answer questions, that we have a team of experts there to help answer. And then just familiarize yourself with the resources that we have, which I will be sharing in an upcoming slide. And next slide. Just some coming soon. So we have some materials available now. Additional materials will be available, honestly, in the next week. We are just finalizing some of those things. So make sure, if you want access to these, you can go to getctc.org/navigators to get access to them. The next slide. And just with that, thank you. And I will hand it back over. I think, Will, you're back up.
Yeah, thanks, Courtney. Yeah, I just also wanted to highlight like what else people can do today. We're all here today because we want people on this call to get money you're eligible for, but we also know that you serve kids and families and adults across the state. So we want everyone to get these resources. And so, we're asking for your help to spread the word. We highlighted, basically many people are likely eligible to get thousands of dollars back when they file their federal taxes this year. The deadline is just over a month away. It's April 18th. And so we wanted to flag that for people. Thank you, Courtney, for just sharing all the different Get Your Refund tools and resources, and also the Navigator resources and trainings. I was on a call, it's a couple weeks back. It was a call with the White House. So there was Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, Vice President Kamala Harris, and they talked about this issue and basically like how it's up to all of us at every level, from folks in the White House and in state agencies, to people on the ground, to people who are in organizations. It's up to all of us at every level to make sure that adults and families are aware that these resources exist, and to, again, provide information and education to get people connected. So yeah, just wanted to really highlight that unique URL, the getyourrefund.org/CTC Ohio. Please share that with the people that you serve. I can also share a social media toolkit that has several different like Facebook posts and tweets and images to help share with people in your community. We know word of mouth makes a real difference. So people in your community, you're a great messenger for those existing relationships that you have. I also wanted to flag, so Katherine with CDF and I co-wrote a blog that basically provides a lot of the information that we shared today. It's a high-level overview of the different tax credits. It includes a lot of those calculators so people can see if they're eligible and how much they might be able to get. And it also includes that link for how to go get that money and complete your taxes. So we invite you to share that blog as well with people in your community. And yeah, I guess the only other thing, we talked about how all these tax credits are temporary. They're for this year. So we also, want to invite you all to join. We're calling on Congress to extend the child tax credit, to extend these expansions of the EITC and the Child Independent Care Tax Credit. This again makes a difference in terms of family security and stability. And so, we want to keep up that fight and highlight the need to make this not just be a one-year thing, but to really make these changes permanent. So I think with that, just want to thank everyone so much for joining us. Thank you, Children's Defense Fund of Ohio, for hosting and organizing. And I think I'm going to kick it back to Katherine to facilitate questions.
Thanks, Will. Yeah, we just want to open it up. I know we have about 8 minutes left, but I think sometimes it can be really useful to ask questions about this. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A or in the chat. We did have one come in, and I think this is for you, Courtney, around ITIN. Someone asked, will people know what an ITIN is on the website that you just showed? And maybe you can talk a little bit about ITIN assistance and helping families who might have kids with Social Security numbers, but they themselves don't have a Social Security number, get their ITINs.
Yeah, no, those are good questions. From my experience, people who have ITINs know what an ITIN is. I do think we always get a few questions from people with Social Security numbers who are saying, I guess I need an ITIN, I don't have one. And we then have to just modify their application slightly. For those of you who don't know, an ITIN is an individual taxpayer identification number, and it's intended to help somebody file a tax return for those who aren't able to get a Social Security number, so largely undocumented workers. And there are still tax credits that are available for those with ITINs, so it's really important that we reach those populations. We now have a new system in place that if they go through those triage questions, one of the questions we ask is, do you have a Social Security? Do you have a copy of your Social Security card or ITIN letter? Do you know the number, but you don't have it? Or do you need help applying for an ITIN? If they mark that they need help applying for an ITIN, that's when we make sure to route them to a VITA program who is experienced in helping somebody apply for those ITINs. Unfortunately, a lot of the ITIN application, or not a lot, there's a piece of the ITIN application that they have to go in person to a place to certify their documents. But that virtual VITA site can help guide them to where they can do that, what they need to do, all of those next steps. So if somebody that you're working with is undocumented, doesn't have an ITIN currently, can't get a Social Security card, any of those situations, or a Social Security number, I should say, use that triage to help make sure that they get connected to a VITA site that's going to be able to help best serve them. Hopefully that helps answer that question.
Thanks, Courtney. Are there any other questions? I do want to just make note, because it came up in the chat, we will be sharing the slides and all many of the resources we discussed today in a follow-up email to our registered participants for this webinar, and we'll also include our contact information should you have questions for us. It doesn't seem like we have, we have a Q&A. Just wondering about the tax credit for those without children. Is there an income limit? And I think that might go towards you, Will, with the earned income tax credit, if you want to bring that back up. And maybe that also is for you, Courtney, about the website and get your refund through that.
So yeah, I can speak to the earned income tax credit. So for households, or basically adults without dependents, adults without children, the maximum income is $21,500 $430. So that's for a single adult. So if you made less than that amount last year, you're likely eligible for the earned income tax credit.
Yeah, and one other thing I just want to add on, because for those who haven't yet received their third stimulus payment, there's no income requirement. As far as you don't have to make a certain amount of money to qualify for it, it's going to be eligible for, well, I mean, there's a maximum income limitations that is much higher than anything we're discussing right now. But generally, we want to make sure also that anybody who's missed their stimulus payments are filing to claim that. If any, one population we're really interested in trying to serve this year are also incarcerated individuals who absolutely have not received any stimulus payments and are eligible for them. If you at all are working on outreach to incarcerated individuals, please reach out to me so we can figure out how to best help you. It obviously looks very different than a lot of our other resources and materials, but just want to call that out.
Thank you both. Maybe give it one more minute or so, but we really appreciate everyone being here today. I mean, we are just trying to spread the word so that Ohio can get as much money in the pockets of families as possible. Through our outreach efforts just last year, we saw many people using that Get CTC portal to access those funds, and we just want to make sure people are aware of these credits. So we really appreciate you all participating today and telling everyone about these tax credits. And like I said, we will follow up with all of the materials and are open to any questions. And as Will mentioned, again, April 18th is the deadline for filing taxes, but that Get CTC simplified filing portal will remain open much longer after that, I believe until October 18th of the fall of this year. So there's so much time to help families access these funds. Well,
that was one other thing I wanted to just lift up was, so Children's Defense Fund, Code for America, and the Cuyahoga County Job and Family Services last year worked together and ultimately, encouraged a lot of families who participated in SNAP to go to the Get CTC page and file their simplified form. That led to over $500,000 flowing to kids and families in Cuyahoga County. So that's another way, if people on this call use text message to reach out to the people that you serve, those are other resources that we can provide to reach out and let those people know about it.
Thanks, Will. Thanks, everyone. We appreciate you being here for this lunch hour. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.